Souder. I work at First Pres in Chattanooga, and we have, as a youth minister, we're always looking for ways. I think especially if you've been here and you've heard philosophy of ministry stuff, you're always looking for ways to connect your youth ministry to the rest of the church. And especially if you're a place like First Pres Chattanooga that's 150 years old, and 80% of your congregation is 60 and older, and you got kids running through the halls, and they're going, get these youth under control, what's going on, can we ever connect two generations? Sometimes that's a really hard task, depending on your setting, whether it's a small church or a big church, an established church or a church plant. You're always wanting to try to figure that end of the spectrum out. And also, there's a great dilemma that we create when we have our children baptized as infants, and our congregation takes a vow, right? We have them raise their hand, or sometimes when I've done infant baptism, they'll actually make the members stand just to solidify it in their head that they're taking a vow to assist the parents in the training of their children in the fear and admonition of the Lord. But after that vow is taken, there's very little, practically speaking, that is done in the life of the church to help our members stay true to that vow. There's a very small percentage of them that become Sunday school teachers, that maybe become adult volunteer leaders, or maybe have a fellowship event at their house. They just never really get to know the kids. And so this Pray For Me campaign that Tony has kind of started is a really cool way to connect generations in the church. It's very simple. It's not a lot of bells and whistles. It's not a thing that you're going to have to jump through a bunch of hoops to make it happen. And as he explains it, it'll make more sense. But Tony's a good friend of mine. We work on the same hallway together. He made a face when I said that. Did you see that? I said, a good friend of mine. He went, just kidding. No, he's been a great friend of mine since I've moved to Chattanooga. And we have just a great man. He's married, been married for 29 years, is that right? And has two daughters that were in our youth ministry, two twins that are now in college. And so it's been great to get to know him. And he and Joey and I met about 2 months ago or so, and I wanted Joey to hear what Tony had been working on. And Joey kind of heard it, and he goes, you got to come talk to our guys about it. So come up here, Tony. I want to pray for Tony as he comes. Lord Jesus, thanks for my brother and what you've done in his life, how you have brought him to this really important time where he can have a voice into the church and into generations that are struggling to be connected. And it seems as if we look at it from a worldly perspective, the younger generation and the older generations in the church seem to be miles and miles apart. So I pray that you help Tony communicate well what the strategy might be for our churches to help bridge that gap. In Jesus' name, amen.
I'm very excited to be here today. In the last several years, the ministry I work for have been wrestling with some of the data that's out there that's not good data, it's accurate data, but it feels bad. And it's on your sheet. One of the things that, mine has the answer to all that. The 80% of everyone that comes to Christ does so before the age of 18, which puts the importance on those that serve young people pretty high. What you do is important. And what parents to do with their teenagers is important in relationship to passing on the faith. But 80% of those that come to Christ do so before age 18. So investing in the next generation and young people is incredibly important. One of the things that we've come across in the last period of time, and you guys have heard most of these statistics, but here's one that I did not hear, did not know, that 80% of all teens connect with the church for at least a 2-month period during the teen years. And that's a Barna statistic, and he's talking about the broad church, but 80% of teens connect with the church for at least a 2-month period. Now that means they may come to a lock-in and hang out for a couple of months after that, and then they blow out. But the important piece of that, in my mind, is that these young people, we have access to them. There's an access point with young people for at least a 2-month period, but many more have more time. The next statistic on the left is that, and we're going to stick with the 80s, 80% of young people that are raised in the church are leaving the church by age 29. 70% do so before the age by age 23, excuse me, and then another 10% do so by age 29. Now, when I'm looking at that, that's 100% of that statistic is unacceptable. Because we're looking at, those are people that are raised in the church. That's not talking about, that's a totally different statistic than the one that says that 80% of young people engage with the church for at least a 2-month period. That's a whole different dynamic than those that are raised in the church are leaving. Now, Sticky Faith, are you guys familiar with Sticky Faith? Kara Powell out of the Fuller Youth Institute. Probably the newest book is this launch kit that you've seen, the Sticky Faith for parents, Sticky Faith for youth workers. This right here is a great resource that takes all their stuff, puts it into one manual, basically a coach in a box, so to speak, that helps you do really just good youth ministry. It's not, they've put their name Sticky Faith on it, but it's really just good youth ministry, how to connect with parents, how to connect with your volunteers, and so forth. But they say that 40 to 50% of teens from good youth ministries and good families are drifting away from the church. Now, so they've done different kind of research. They're not talking about the broad stroke of the church. They're narrowing it down, saying, okay, those young people from good churches and good youth groups and good families are drifting away. Now, one of the things that in our last couple of years we've done, as we've kind of narrowed down into these statistics, we kind of looked at 2 books, Soul Searching and Almost Christian. Are you guys familiar with this? Give me a nod, shake heads, yes. Then you probably know that both these books were written from the same research. One's from more of a sociological standpoint, so if you like sociological kind of stuff, this will be your book. This one's written much more from a Christian standpoint. What does this mean to the church? Henry Creasy Dean teaches up at Princeton. But then if you want the five-page, Almost Christian in a nutshell, Google that, and there is actually an article that was done by a group out of Atlanta, or excuse me, out of Nashville, right here, Center for. Anyways, Google it. Almost Christian in a nutshell. 5 pages, easy to read, and that'll give you some clarity. Now, the reason why that's important is because they're wrestling with what's going on with young people and the church. And in this book, she comes up with 4 common factors. Now, this is important. 4 common factors that are 4 factors that are common to those that stay connected with the church. The first is that all of them have adult believers that are intentionally investing in their lives. All of them do. That's key. That right there is the linchpin of all these 4. But then the second thing is that these young people that stay connected know and embrace truth about God and Christ. There's an understanding of truth, which is imperative, but there's also an embracing of it. There's a heart response to it. There's something that they're owning it, that goes along with that. Those that are common is not just that they have head knowledge and they're staying the course. Those that stay the course also embrace it. The third thing is that they share their faith both verbally and practically, which has huge implications, absolutely huge implications for us as the ministers of the gospel and sharing the faith and passing on the faith to the next generation. Because these three things: one, we need the adult believers. They need to help the young people know, and not just know, but also embrace the truth. But then they also give them clear ways that they can share their faith both verbally and practically. And the last one is that they see themselves as part of a bigger story. God's up to something, and they're part of it, but they're not the center of it. Many of those that are exiting the church are bailing on the church because it didn't measure up somehow. They were disappointed in some way. So those four common factors are key in some of what we've kind of wrestled with over the last 2 years in thinking about how do we connect students to the church. And where we landed was this, is that we needed to figure out a way to help, how do we help more adults connect with more teenagers more naturally than ever before. And the reality is that we've always wanted more adults to connect with more teenagers more naturally than ever before. But the reality is we challenge, coax, shame adults to move towards students. Most don't, some do. And so instead of doing the same thing we've done for years, I've been in youth ministry for 30 plus years, and again, in that time, we've always wanted more adults to move towards students. But they're afraid. They're afraid. They think back to their middle school years, and they don't want any part of it. They want to step away from it. And so a key component for us was how do we do it so that it's natural? How do we make it so that a student and an adult could connect in relationship in a natural way? I'm going to push pause right there. But as you're thinking about connecting students to the church, you have to think in the realm of 4 different categories and strategies for those categories. You have to think about families and parents. You have to think about the overall church, you as the youth ministry, and then the students themselves. Because if you don't think through all of those 4 categories, what happens is that you are going to run into a roadblock that you didn't anticipate. Like, for instance, you have a vision for getting adults to connect with students, but then you haven't prepped the students in a way that they feel okay with it. Anytime they feel awkward, they're going to back out of it. Same with adults. We move towards things, we vote with our feet, and if they feel awkward at any point, they're going to back out unless we are able to satisfy what's making us feel awkward so that they can connect. Because the goal is if we can get adults and students to connect, then we're really driving home the linchpin of passing on a sustainable faith. At the bottom of your page, I got a few passages that all of us know, kind of listed there. And one of my favorites, and all of these actually have become my favorites because I've been wrestling with this for some time now. But I love Psalm 71, 17 and 18. It says, since my youth, O Lord, you have taught me, and I still declare your mighty acts. Do not forsake me when I'm old and gray, or old and bald and gray. Do not forsake me when I'm old and gray, but you can get there and just lose them. Here's my paraphrase. Until I share give me one more chance to share the greatness of God with the next generation. He's seen the greatness of God in his life. He's on his last, he's on a downward slope. He knows where he's finishing his course, and he's saying, give me one more chance. Give me one more chance to share the greatness of God with the next generation. I want to do this. I've seen it, I've savored it, and now I want to share it one more time. I want to finish with this, letting the next generation know that you're great. That's been a huge proponent in driving us and figuring out how do we get more adults to connect with more teenagers more naturally. Also, one right in the middle, one Psalm 145:4. One generation shall commend your works to another and shall declare your mighty acts. We all know Judges 2, that the reality is that when Joshua and elders died, the stories of God's greatness died with them. And that the next generation did what was right in their own eyes. Because they didn't know the stories of God's greatness. And so that's kind of here. The stories of sharing God's greatness is here. But what we're talking about here, we don't even have relationships where the adults can share the stories. Or the relationships are minimal. And what happens is we've got to get, how do we get more? And a plethora, I love that word, I've been waiting all day to use that. We need a plethora of relationships with the adult congregation to connect with students, but we have to do it naturally. And that's why we've landed with the Pray For Me campaign. What it's simply designed to do is that instead of asking the adults one more time to meet with students, we've actually changed the paradigm. We're actually equipping students and making it easy for them to invite 3 adults from 3 different generations to serve as their prayer champions. Now, the reason why we're going this way is because prayer is the most basic of Christian acts. You can't be a believer without prayer. And it's the most basic of Christian acts that someone can commit to for somebody else. They don't have to take them to get a Coke or a burger or anything. But if they say, if a student comes up to an adult, most likely that adult's going to say yes. You ask them to be a prayer champion. And plus, prayer champion sounds important. Not just if would you be my prayer partner or would you pray for me? It's all the same, but we serve as our prayer champion for a year. Now, the reason why we've done 3 different generations is because we don't want that student just to have a relationship with one, usually the younger generation. We want them to get a taste of what is going on with the whole swath of the body of Christ. Because we want those adults that have tasted and seen the greatness of God to have an opportunity to share it. Because the reality is in each one of our churches, there's adults that care about the next generation, but they have no vehicle to actually speak into their world. No vehicle. No way. They don't have relationships. They have grandchildren or great-grandchildren. They long to have a way. Matter of fact, it's called the Pray For Me campaign because of one older lady that came up to me after I had done a 5-week course in our church on, we used to call it the Generation Builder Initiative. It sounded cool. It felt like it for a moment. And what I did this whole 5-week deal, and then called in to be generation builders to invest in the next generation. We probably had 10 people out of 50 say yes. And I was disappointed, but I kept that to myself. But then 2 weeks later, this one lady in Wilma comes up to me and says, Tony, I care about the next generation, but I don't know how I can get involved in their lives, but I do know this. I can pray for them. And that moment, we had all the pieces together. We just had to change some of the language so that it became created a vehicle for anybody in the church to connect with the next generation through prayer. And so that's really how the Pray For Me campaign became the Pray For Me campaign and not the Generation Builder Initiative. Because this resonates so much easier, the Pray For Me campaign, and this takes much more explanation. 5 weeks and only 10 people. I knew that was the way to go. So the Pray For Me campaign, three adults from 3 different generations, the students invite them to be their prayer champions. And the whole goal is this, is that we're asking that adult believer to do one thing, pray. Now, as an adult believer, I look in the mirror and I say, unless I have a way of remembering and a way of praying for that student effectively, I'm going to forget, and then when I see them in the hall, I'm going to feel badly that I haven't been praying. Because they've invited me and I said yes, and then when I see them, I know I haven't, and then I feel badly. So that's where the book came in. We said, okay, how can we help adults to pray effectively for students in a way that wasn't just about their academics, their athletics, or their associations. I needed to do 3 A's there. So we identified 7 essential categories that are listed in the book. They come from 2 different passages of Scripture. They come from Luke 2:52. This is a test. What's that passage?
grew in wisdom and stature and favor with God.
Thank you very much. He was in the last session too. I'm just kidding.
Rachel told me.
Okay, Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and favor with God and man. Now, everybody grows in stature except for people like me. And so we know that we wanted the students to grow in wisdom and favor with God and man. And we knew that, I looked at that and I said, okay, Luke could have said anything he wanted to about Jesus' early life. But he made a specific, intentional point of making sure that we knew that he grew in wisdom and favor with God and man. And when I look at it, if we don't have God's favor and wisdom and with God and with man, then we're going to be stumped too. And so are the students that we're trying to lead. And so those became two of the essentials that we're praying for the next generation. The other 5 come from 1 Timothy 4:12. 1 Timothy 4:12, don't let anybody look down in your youth, but in your speech, conduct, love, faith, and purity, set an example for the believers. Now, if you had a chance to kind of hover over those 7 things, you'd realize that they basically cover pretty much every aspect of life. Now, what we've done in the book is basically taken a passage of Scripture that related to each one of those essentials and used that and turn that into a prayer for the next generation. So that the adult can get a prompt, they look into the passage, they hover over the passage, and they pray the prayer, and that's going to usually prompt them to pray other things. If they just stick with reading that prayer, praying that prayer as it's written, that's not what it's designed to do. It's designed to by God's grace, stir up within them more of things to pray for that student along the way. Make it their own. We want them to make it their own. We don't want them to just pray a prayer and say, hey, did that. Because we want their hearts to go large towards God and towards the students. Now, the sweetness of this is that churches that are small, that have 5 students in it, 7 students. There's one church that's in town right now that have 7 students, and I think they've got 21 prayer champions that are praying for those students. They're launching this coming up weekend. But that's a church that we've been trying to serve churches in the Chattanooga and North Georgia region for the last 20 years, and helping youth ministry leaders do their job more effectively and more completely in reaching and discipling students. But we've always realized that we're missing the small church. We're not able to help the small church, and so what happens is the Pray For Me campaign really helps the small church to get the adult believers within the body connected with the young people that the volunteers are trying to serve in a unique way. But it also can be used with a larger church. It really is, the cool thing is that it doesn't matter what size church you are, you can still use it. Every young person in every church needs the adult body to be praying for them. One, you get a supernatural component going on here. And then you have the relational component where they actually are getting in relationship with the spectrum of the body of Christ, adult leadership, or adult believers in that church. And they have no idea, the students, they have no idea the goodness that's coming their way, because one, those adults are praying for them, and just knowing the adults. It's easy to leave an institution. I think that one of the key components of the leaving losses that we are experiencing with young people that are exiting the church, one of the key components is that they step out of our youth ministries and they don't know the adult population within the church. And so what we're trying to do, part of the components of the Pray For Me campaign is trying to address that. Just creating relationships in the most natural way possible, at the most basic level, but yet creating a supernatural bond that supersedes the basicness of it. It's a conundrum. I've been trying to use that word too. It's a conundrum, but it's a good one. So, let me pause right here and ask any questions. Any questions? I've kind of now question.
I like the idea, and I just wonder if you could flesh it out a little bit more of having the kids ask those 3 generations. But why not just have me ask the adults? Or, the youth director ask the adults.
Oh, that's a great question. That's a great question. The reason why is because you've not created a relationship with the adults, the students with the adults. You just have the adults out there saying, yes, they're praying with the students, but the students don't know that they're out there. And there's not a connection. Here's what's the cool thing about the students invited. What's your name? If I'm a student and I come up and ask Alex if he'll be one of my prayer champions for the school year, and he says yes, then what happens is that I've just built an invisible bridge to Alex. Alex maybe wouldn't have moved towards me and done all the hard work of trying to build a relationship with me, but I just built him a bridge. Just by asking him, I've invited him into my life, and now he can move towards me pretty much at will when he sees me in the hall and not be afraid. Whereas before, we're thrusting a lot of work on him if I'm expecting Alex to move my direction and create some kind of relationship. That's why we've done it. That's why we do the upfront harder work by creating the opportunity for them to actually invite them. And really what that does is that makes it real for the adults and the students. Otherwise, it's just this abstract thing out there that somebody's praying for me. Well, what good is prayer anyways? I mean, I'm just speaking as what a student would think. Or what some adults think, actually. Any other questions? I'm still on pause here.
Are you planning on talking about the vehicle whereby the students can invite, or is that listed?
The vehicle, yes. The time where they do it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I assume you get there, but I didn't want to.
Well, no. I push the pause button to see what things are being stirred up in people.
Yes.
So if you ask those questions, then I make sure I get the things that have to be. One of the ways that is taking place is that, I'll give you an example of, at First Pres, basically, the students sign up saying, yes, I'm in. Now some churches are saying, this is what we're doing as a youth ministry. And we're doing this as a youth ministry, so we're giving you the opportunity as a student in our ministry to have 3 people that will pray for you during the school year. And this is what it's going to work. We're going to have this Prayer Champion Sunday on February 23rd, and then we're all going to be at the Student Center. Now, what's going to happen before this time, we get the students to sign up at First Pres. They signed up. Now over here, we're working the angles at the church itself. It's really, to do it like we just kind of are proposing, most churches, it's a church-wide thing. The adults need to know that the students are coming. There's got to be everybody's got to know that the other parts are happening. And so that we've also want to make sure that the students aren't going to a place and asking an adult. We want the students to be able to fish from a stocked pond. We want to make sure when they go to an adult, they know that everybody's in there is a yes. That yes, they can go to anybody in that room, they're all a yes. That yes, I'll be your prayer champion. So we actually have an event on February 23rd at First Pres where we'll meet at the Student Center. Those students that have signed up, there's 60 right now. So we'll have 180 other adults that have also signed up that have responded from showing the video that we'll show you in a minute. But going to Sunday school class and saying, hey, we're launching this Pray For Me campaign where every student will have 3 adult believers as prayer champions. What that means for you, and I'll give you my spiel that I tell in the Sunday school class. And then what that means for you is that you say yes. You say, yes, I'll be a prayer champion for a student. And what that means is that you're saying, I'll use this book to help me to stay the course and praying effectively for that student. And if you say to that, yes, sign up today. And then on the 23rd of February, come here. We'll send you an email because when they sign up, they give us their contact information. So we have all that data in there. We know what generation they're in. We know whether they want a large print book or a regular edition book because we have that available to them. So we want to make it easy for them. And so then we'll send them an email saying, hey, don't forget that this coming up Sunday is Prayer Champion Sunday. Meet at the Student Center at 9:45. Don't be afraid. It's going to be great. You're basically trying to make everybody get rid of their nerves. Because the adults are nervous. The students are nervous on the front end. They are. But we're helping them all know that when I'm presenting it to students, I'm telling them, I don't say, do you want somebody to be your prayer warrior or prayer that I don't even use necessarily a prayer champion at that moment. Do you want somebody that will be praying daily, asking God daily to do good things for you? Are you up for that? Well, most students will, I have to frame it in a way that students will say, yeah, I can do that. I'm up for that. So then, on that day, going back to the actual event, every adult that comes in, and we know what generation they're from. So there's 20s and 30s, 40s and 50s and 60s and above. And each generation will have a different color name tag. Blue for the 20s and 30s, red for the 40s and 50s, and green for the 60s and above. And so what happens is that a Again, I'm a student, I'm to Alex. Alex is clearly in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 20s and 30s. So I go up, Alex, you be my prayer champion, one of my prayer champions. He says, yes, I take his name tag. Therefore, he does not have a name tag anymore, so nobody else can come up with him. He's my prayer champion. And so what it eliminates is it makes it so that if the popular adult isn't being barraged and the other adult that is doing his best to say, yeah, I'd be willing to be a prayer champion, feeling like he's in middle school dodgeball again. Am I going to get picked? So we're trying to eliminate those things. And we think that we're addressing all the issues, but if you kind of start thinking about this and have you thought about this, hopefully the answer is yes. But if we haven't, I'm going to say thank you. Because we want to think about all the issues to make it as smooth and streamlined as possible for each church. So that's what it looks like on the day of, and I may not have answered all your questions. Any other questions?
Is there anything that kind of keeps that relationship maintained throughout the school year, like any contact between them?
Yeah, a lot of that is dependent on the church. We're trying not to mandate too much from our end and create some flexibility. Now, one of the things we are trying to do is that the people that are signing up as prayer champions, we're trying to work it so that they actually sign up as prayer champions on our website, so they can get ongoing, like twice a month emails to keep them in the game, or encouraging them in how to connect with their student, and also ways to pray. But we're also the campaign coordinator, prayer champion coordinator at your church would be the person who they would get certain emails to say, hey, here's an idea that some churches are using to connect their students on an ongoing basis. So, because every setting is different. Again, your setting is going to allow for a certain kind of connection. And if you're a large church, you might want to do it by 8 grade levels. You create the prayer champions that are praying for the 6th grade. You create some event and create it where it's natural for them to start getting together. One of the things that we are encouraging that on the day of that they get their prayer champions, because this is all new to everybody on that day. That first time around, it's all new to everybody. Once the student's done it once, it's all pat. They're just getting new people that they can get on that day. They're going to get a picture with those 3 adults, and so this youth ministry will know who's praying for those students. And there's other ways that this youth ministry will know who's praying for those students, and then parents will actually get information on who's praying for their students. So you're trying to create as many connections in the body of Christ that didn't exist before in a healthy way. And one of the things, just by getting the prayer champions from 3 different generations, you're connecting the generations within the church, not just with that student, but with those other 3 people. They may not know each other. So, any other questions? You look like you have a question.
Yeah, I mean, my youth group, I've had 21 youth, and I have 45 adults. So, I mean, my number-wise, I'm going to have
Yep. That's a
work?
great question. The way that works, whether we're suggesting that we've thought about that, and you make adjustments, there's always going to be adjustments. But one of the adjustments in your setting is that those adults, obviously you don't want to get almost all those adults to be praying. And so you basically they'd be praying 3 adults or 2 adults, 2 students per adult, or something, whatever the math works out to be. They would just, whatever you figure out the math, and they would have 2 name tags on that day. So that you're creating, the goal is this: you want every student to have 3 different relationships with adults each year. Now that may mean in some churches, like First Pres, it may mean that you get, and I'm not sure how it's going to play out yet, but it may mean that we have more senior saints than we do the 20s and 30s, so we're going to run out of the 20s and 30s people. So we're going to have maybe, some people are going to have 1 40s and 50s and 2 60s and above. But the goal is that they have 3 adult believers that they're building relationships with, and the adults are pouring into them. Because again, at the end of the day, these students are building. One of the things happening is you're building a network of relationships for these students that they don't even have a clue that they need. They need a network of relationships so that they can flourish in their faith and in their life. And we're actually creating an opportunity for them to build that in a natural way. A friend of mine told me, I got this question right here, I see you. A friend of mine told me the other day, he goes, Tony, one of the cool things about this is that it levels the playing field within the church for students. Because you can have students from different socioeconomic levels, and because the students are inviting adult believers in the church that they would have never had a relationship with otherwise, what happens is that you're helping them create a network that they would have never been able to create on their own. And whereas my daughters, because of my role in the church, and because of the people I know, they've got a broader network. But there's some people that just joined our church recently that their network is very small, and it's clear because they come from more of a poverty-centered life. And what happens is their children are involved in this. What happens? They're getting connections that they would have never gotten before. And to me, that is exciting, because that's life-changing for those students, not just that parent that's bringing their student into that ministry. Anyways, back where.
Yeah, 2 questions, and I'm sorry if you already addressed one of them. One, I'm a 20, 30-something praying for a student, and there's also a 40, 50-something and a 60-plus.
Yep.
How am I connected, or am I connected with those 2 people? Is that addressed at all in this format? And then my second question is, when I'm done praying through this book, and for that student, what happens then? Like, how is that connection continuing? Do I go through the book again?
Yes.
Do we end the program and I'm getting a new student? How does that work?
Well, in our view, the church would do this every year, because you're trying to create. It's not like, okay, you students have enough people praying for you, have enough people that connections. Well, every student, every time a young person comes into the youth ministry from 6th grade on up, the goal is that they would get 3 new prayer champions every year. And so, as a prayer champion, they would pray through that 3 times a year. And so, and the summer's off, it gives them kind of, so it doesn't feel like the song never ends. Yeah, and then you start up every September. And so it creates another opportunity for new students. And you can still, one of the questions that comes up, and this may be kind of getting at one of your questions, is that some churches like to build more deep relationships rather than broad. So, why can't I just keep the student that I have this first time and all the way through? Well, the reason is I've already tried to address it, is that students themselves need a web of relationships that's broader than just with a few people. Now, the reality is that they hopefully a third of those relationships will become really vibrant relationships along the way. And so they've got not the illusion or delusion that all those relationships are going to be vibrant. So hopefully there's a third of those that would become vibrant, and that those students, those adults would continue to pray for those students, not necessarily on a daily basis, but when they see them or think about them, they've already got a heart for that student, and they've kind of prayed deep, weighty things for that student when they think about it. You had another question, please?
Yeah, my other question was the prayer champions, like connecting those generations. Is there a format for that, or is that something that you're not addressing?
That is in the process. That's not something that we've kind of said. Again, not necessarily mandating or kind of creating the structure for it to happen automatically, but we have addressed several areas that are creating suggestions for churches that formats for the prayer champions for Tony. My 3 prayer champions that create environments where they can pray together for me. So they're building relationships across generational lines this way, and not just this way. So, but that's not as defined as great. So if you have some good ideas on that, I'd love to hear those.
I love this, and I'm actually kind of processing how I would implement church in my church. And one of the roadblocks or great concerns that I'm assuming I would really need to work through with my youth ministry team is our child protective policy. The world we live in is unfortunately, there's a lot of wickedness, and more churches are establishing child protective policies that would include background checks for the regular volunteers. And doing this, my concern would be, in particular, the sharing of the child's contact information would then suddenly require us to maybe have to do a background check for a whole church, or to what extent are we protecting our kids? And so I'm not trying to criticize, I'm just trying to think how to communicate safety to parents. That's within our context, been one a major focus.
Sure. But I've already mentioned a number of ways of accountability are taking place. That the youth ministry, you would already know who's praying for who. You'd have documentation on the picture, plus you'd also have the data written down on who's praying for what student. And the other thing is that we're only asking them to pray. We're not asking them to be their mentor. We're not asking them to, to take them to Burger King. We use Burger King. Sorry. We're not asking them to take them to movies or anything. We're asking them to pray. And so, but what it does is it widens the pool of people that would be potential volunteers to work in the youth ministry, and then they would have to have background. But at this level, if we're at the point where you have to have a background check to pray for somebody, then I'm not sure. I don't think you do. I don't think that. I think it's a valid question. I think
my concern is not praying for. My concern is, again, I'm thinking in particular about specific.
Sure.
Is that they would be concerned that their kids' contact information was leaked.
And they don't have to give that.
The way we've done it in our church, we're just giving, and I asked a guy in our church who's a lawyer and in charge of that stuff from our church's standpoint, and he said everything you're giving them is public knowledge. Name, grade, school, parent's name, and age. That's it. I'm not giving an email, I'm not giving a cell phone. I'm just giving them. And then we have on our card three areas of your life that I can be praying for. And that's it. So I'm not giving them any personal contact information. Does that make sense?
So, question right here.
So it sounds like, if I've understood the sort of vehicle to get people connected, you have some pre-planning, the youth who want to participate selected the adults who are willing to do this, and then you have a sort of event to get them connected. Thinking of maybe a youth who isn't coming from a Christian home, come and join your group sort of late in the game for this, and they hear about the other kids just sort of discussing that happening. Is there a way to plug them in some way to this late in the game?
Yes. There's
the loser adult who didn't make it.
Then you scratch around from other prayer champions. There's several ways to do that, and you determine based on your setting. But there'll be typically there's going to be more adults that will be willing to pray than are needed. I'm saying that unless it's not sold. I've been working with the guy. I don't know if I mentioned this from the previous one, but the guy has seven students. He's got 21 prayer champions. Small church, but he's not very good at selling, and so I'm having to coach him. We're talking how to make sure that they have something to respond with. He'd make an announcement. If you want to be a part of this, let me know. And did you give them something to sign up on? Right? He wasn't making it easy for them. But typically, you're going to have some leftovers, but then also you would have a group of people. I would say the easier way is that when you have people coming in the ministry along the way, that you have a group of people that you can tap on the shoulder and say, "Hey, I've got a new student here. Would you be there?" And you would just add them that week.
Is there a conscious effort made, if possible, to push students to ask adults who they don't know?
Well, they're gonna, we let them know that you're gonna go to the ones you think that you know right now. That's gonna be a minimal. It's not a very big pool. They're not gonna know that many, and they're gonna. And if that person's already been asked, their name tag's been gone. So they're gonna be forced to naturally go. But we're gonna also encourage them that everybody in this room's a yes. You don't have to be afraid. You just need to get 3 different color name tags, and I would encourage you to find people that you don't know. So it's setting it up that let them know that this is a good thing. You don't have to be afraid. All these people want to pray for good things for you this year from God. Does that answer your question? Any other questions? I'm going to show a video, and then we'll kind of do the last.
What do you live for? When the tick-tock of time stops, will you go on? Who will you die for? When the hour comes, will you be transformed? Where is your past? And where are you keeping your future? What of you is lasting in this long last life? What is your power but this prayer in the night?
Pray for me. Pray for me. Pray for me.
Pray for me.
I am not my own.
I am not my own, but I will live for you. With my prayers, I will shield your faith, for faith can move mountains. With my words, I will guard your love, for love is pure.
Love is pure.
With my life, I will show you hope.
Hope, for the hope of heaven is our reward.
When the wind passes over me, I will be gone. I will be gone. This spirit remains in you.
Remains in you. In hearts that run.
In hearts that run on the highways of Zion.
If you will pray for me, I will carry this fire forward forever.
Basically, we put that together so that it makes it easier for people to say, oh yeah, I can do that. I can be involved with that. Any other questions you might have, there's a website, prayformecampaign.com, is on the back, it's on the back of your book. Joey just wanted to make sure that you had that copy, just so that you have a sense of, it's a gift for you guys. If you have any questions, I'll be here till the end of the worship time, then I'll be heading back. Any questions left over? Questions? What I didn't do in the front end, I want to make sure that we use all our time for I think the things that are most important. But just to kind of give you the 5 milestones of who Tony Souder is. It was when I came to Christ, a month before I turned 18 years old. Teacher shared his faith with me in eastern rural North Carolina at a small Free Will Baptist church. Led me to the Lord. And then the second milestone was when I married my wife, who this October will be 29 years. When I married her, she is nearly over 100 pounds of delight and could make a hardwood floor sing with her clogging abilities. Because of 20-some years of hardship and health issues, she walks with a cane now. She doesn't drive. And God has used that to hone who I am. And that's what it's the suffering could be its own milestone. It's just a long one. it's just a really long one. But coming to Christ, my wife, the suffering itself is its own milestone. My daughters, who are twins at Belhaven University, one's a dance minor with an elementary ed major. Their milestone, one is because when my wife was 11 years old, she had a ruptured appendix and scarred all her female organs and made it impossible to have kids. So we had to do in vitro, and the ability to do in vitro was made possible because when my grandmother died, she left us some stock that was the amount of money that it would take to do in vitro once, and God gave us twins. That was a milestone. The last milestone, or there's two other milestones. One is when I took the job at the Chattanooga Youth Network 20 years ago to be able to work with youth ministry leaders across denominational lines throughout the Chattanooga North River region. Now, I never knew that God's redeeming me in a Free Will Baptist church and winning me to the Reformed faith through a patient man who was my wife's pastor for 50 years. Dedicated, soft-spoken, but I remember being a high-strung, arrogant young man and sitting in his living room, and I remember the day that the light went on, and he would say, well, let's look at another passage. And he would just say, let's look at another passage. And he took me to Romans 9, and we're looking at Romans 9, and in his soft demeanor, and he was saying, let's read this. And we were reading it, and that moment I realized I was the guy Paul was arguing against. And I said, at that moment I knew I didn't know why Paul had his position, but I knew I didn't want to be the guy he was arguing against. That's all I knew. That's all I knew. So I gave in. I relented. And God used him, Lewis Baker, to draw me into the Reformed faith. But the cool thing is now, for the last 20 years, I've been able to work with churches across denominational lines throughout our region because I know when you're holding a position, you know what you know. That's all you know. And so I'm able to engage with those individuals no matter where they are and helping them to taste and gently point them to what I believe is more true. And the cool thing is that when you rally people around the glory of God, the greatness of God, they don't rebel against that. They rebel against other things. And the last is that is the book you hold, or the day heaven test, whatever. That's a milestone. I mean, you may read it and you say that's not a big deal. It's a big deal in my world, as far as being is trying to solve a problem within the church and being in youth ministry for 30 plus years, trying to address something that you've tried to address for years and years. However you use it, may I encourage you. Thank you for being here and pray for us. Thank you for your great goodness to us. Thank you for your working in and through our lives. I pray that you would draw us close to you, that we would see your greatness and you would help us to savor you in fullness and sweetness, and that you would give us the overflow to be able to share you freely, that you might be magnified by our lives and our words and our deeds. In Jesus' name.